One. Welcome to the journey, and our journey takes us to a transformative force in human resources and recruitment. With a remarkable track record, our guest has scaled the corporate ladder at prestigious companies like HBR Consulting, Rise, iManage, Johnson Publishing Company, and HARPO Productions, displaying unwavering dedication to operational excellence. As the Chief People Officer at NORC at the University of Chicago, our guest collaborates with top-level leadership to achieve operational brilliance and foster a culture of empowerment. I welcome T, and I'll let her say her name because I know I'm going to say it wrong, but welcome to the journey.
Thank you, Tenia.
Tenia, I remember that. So I said no more script. That's me
Okay.
reading a script.
Okay.
I want us to all feel comfortable, and everyone knows I start with the earliest memories. Everyone has a memory that, as a child or as a teenager or even just someone coming into your life in a young adult life. What was the earliest memories that kick-started your journey personally?
Well, I would say my granddad had a store, a little convenience store, and in the summer, my cousins and we would kind of rotate who would be the manager. And I really enjoyed not just hanging out with my family and my grandfather, but also just learning about, at the time I didn't realize it, but you learn about people, you learn about customer service, you learn about business exchange, and it was also a time where I was boss of my cousins. So, uh, but it was definitely a fun time and a time that um, I tend to bring up a lot when we have our family gatherings.
And that is a really lovely thing to have, that sort of family connection, because for most, and I'm saying most because there is some families that have difficulties, but
Yeah.
having that family connection does make you feel part of a bigger community
Oh,
as a whole anyway, because that is the dynamic of a good solid feel. And if you're
yeah.
in the business market and you're in the work ethic, it is like a work family. So having that family feeling from being in the family to working in the
Hmm.
big corporate world, it is a family.
Yeah, and you learn how to get along with folks. You learn about teamwork. I mean, without all the buzzwords, I grew up in a very diverse environment. So before diversity was a thing, but you learn a lot of coping skills, but you also learn how to manage through conflict, how to manage through difference of opinions. Um, and I think those are all skills that folks need today in the workplace.
Yeah. So going into the workplace, and you say about diversity, do you feel like the diversity followed, or do you feel like it was easy to begin with, or do you feel like it was difficult because of the diversity?
For me, are you
Yeah,
asking for
just for you and generally.
I think it's a challenge that we will always have. Um, and I think some organizations manage it better than others. Um, I think as we look at talent and talent acquisition in the future, at some point, I would hope we move away from labels and titles, but really look at what individuals bring to the table. So, what skills is needed for the role? Who is the person that has the skill for the role? And that tends to be a different conversation than I need to hire three minorities, right? And what happens, and the reason why I say that is what I've seen is when organizations have that focus and they have not spent the time to really develop the healthiness of the organization, then there's a resistance. And so it not deliberately, but it does set people up to fail, right? So if the company is hiring minorities for the sake of hiring minorities versus bringing in skill, and there are a lot of minorities that are very skilled, um, that should be more of the conversation around the skill of the individual, that rather than the color of their skin. So,
Yeah.
I think we have some growing up to do around that topic. Because the reality is that, like Chicago's a very diverse city, but yet in some areas it's still segregated to some degree. You go in some areas, there are more stronger concentrations of likeness. And so when people walk into the doors of their organization, the mindset of their community is still with them. And
Mm.
so, I think organizations that do, and I've seen some organizations do exceedingly well. And it's because they've taken the time to to help the organization look at, what is our core mission, what are our core values, and bringing in the talent to support that based on the skill and not focusing in on other dynamics. Because what
It's
happens is that the organization will then start to resist it, saying, well, they were only hired because they look this way. They were only hired because, the company's trying to meet a number. And, that brings in internal conflict that takes on a different dynamic.
yeah, because I know for a dynamic for my point of view, and this is how I can relate in certain circumstances. Like, I was in the place of work and I felt singled out because I was British. Now I'm living
Mhm.
in America having immigrated from England 7 years ago.
Wow. Okay.
And, I've had jobs and I've had successful jobs. I've had jobs that have been too much for me. But
Hmm.
one of the most recent ones, I felt alone and isolated
Hmm.
because of the fact that the boss introduced me to being British. He didn't
Hmm.
introduce me as
Yeah.
David.
Yeah.
Identified me as British, and he had told other staff members, "You might not understand him because he is British."
Yeah. Yeah.
And I felt like I was being labeled British because I
Hmm.
was different from being in the role, and I
Yeah.
felt like I couldn't work effectively because it was that toxic.
Yeah. And at one particular organization, there was a leader I worked for years ago, and I found him to be extremely just brilliant. And with the diverse body of folks that were in the organization, he really took the time to know the employees. Not just, you're from whatever country or you have blue hair, but he really wanted to know, who are you? And he also wanted folks to know something about him. And so he was building connections authentically, and he was also showing an interest. And then also, to his credit, he said, look, I've expanded my understanding of different nuances that he didn't have before. And I think that's where leaders are able to really do amazing work and gain the respect of their team when actions like that take place versus, I've worked with some, they've never worked with a Black person, definitely not at a senior level. And so their perceptions overruled reality. And it really made it hard to build a relationship because I was always bumping up against their stereotypes of what they thought, a Black person
Yeah.
is. And so I think that's unfortunate. I think as we continue to evolve and compete on a global stage, we have to start looking at talent as talent. And there are so many organizations that do this extremely well, and then there are some that just are horrible.
Yeah.
And they have the numbers, but they have horrible conditions for people to do their best work. So, but the organizations that do it extremely well, and I've seen those organizations in my past, they have a very deliberate force around how they engage all employees. And to your point, it's not a microscope. People aren't under a microscope based on how where they're from, how they talk and all that stuff. The pattern of their speech. It's not about that. It's really about we have this mission, we brought in the best talent, and we're going to work together to do amazing work. That's a
Mm.
different, that's a different engagement versus the other things that we were just describing.
And the thing that I like the most as well with the companies as well nowadays, because they have to be so inclusive and cover all a wide range of people,
Hmm.
is neurodiversity.
Hmm.
And neurodiversity, I see people being employed for even the simplest tasks, but they are given the tasks that they will excel at.
Hmm.
Like I go to a place local to where I live,
Hmm.
and the person behind the counter, he's got eye function and autism by the way he talks, and
Oh.
I applaud him because
Hmm.
he's got access to being behind the counter. I don't know if he's got skills to understand the cash register, but
Hmm.
at least it's given him the chance to be someone, and he's actually shown that he's proud of who he is.
Absolutely.
And I,
Absolutely.
and I just smile every time I see him. I don't know his name,
Hmm.
but I just see him every time when I go there. It's like I see his smile, I see he's doing his best, and I'm proud of that
Yeah.
because like I said, neurodiversity needs more recognition as well.
Yeah.
And, it's not just about autism or, having autism. It's about, people having ADHD.
Yeah.
And that's a silent one more than autism nowadays because it is a high functioning thing, but people don't tend to say, "Are you okay?" because it just gets brushed on the side, or they expect a lot from you, and it's more
Yeah.
pressure on you.
Yeah, I so agree with that. And here's the truth. I truly believe people show up to give their best and do their best. I totally believe that. It's the conditions that exist for them to do that within the organization. It's interesting that you bring up, the greeter. There's a young man that works at Walmart, and he's a greeter, and he has the best personality, he's very consistent, a little bit on the spectrum. And he's the one person I look for when I walk in the store, it just makes it makes me happy, you know. And he just owns that role. And I think that is amazing. And you're right. I believe I think we all have a talent to bring to the table, no matter what form it's in. I think great leaders, good leaders help cultivate that, mold it, shape it, and develop it.
Mm,
And I think that's what good leaders do.
yeah,
They take people where they are and help them grow from there.
yeah. And then it's just a sad reality that upsets me because obviously we have to balance it. The sad reality is some companies don't often have that support for people who are struggling. And,
Yeah.
it's just a struggle every day for individuals. And this is what I've recognized. Certain individuals struggle in their work because they
Hmm.
are alone a lot of the
Yeah.
time. Like I said, I was alone in my job I was talking about. I
Hmm.
know other people who struggle and are alone in their job.
Yes.
And when they get so scared, luckily I was, you know, I removed myself from that position, so I'm not in that position now. But I know some people who can't get themselves out of that position because they,
Yeah.
in a sense, are intimidated, or
Yeah.
in a sense, they are worried that they won't have another job to fall back on. And
Hmm.
sadly, as you know, the workplace is like that at the
Yeah.
moment. It's about you have to stay at what you are miserable at, even
Yeah.
if you are miserable.
Yeah.
just to make the ends meet. But at the same time, if people understand that there is struggles, there should be
Hmm.
more support within the workplace.
Yeah. Yeah. And true. And miserable people, they create a miserable environment.
And it's very toxic sometimes.
It is very toxic. I've seen that picture too. Yeah, I agree. And I think now more than ever, we're in such a polarized state, in our society. People are searching for whatever that comfort is or whatever that happy zone is for them. Some people find it and some people don't. Um, but I've seen where toxic behavior can really hurt a culture, an organization, and also I always say the collateral damage that goes along with it.
And then it goes, like I said, undetected because
Yeah.
there's no moral support to say, is it in-site support system or is a in support room where you can just take yourself out for a couple of
Hmm.
minutes.
Hmm.
That's the sort of support I would like if it was me to say, I like the idea. I'm not saying that, it's brilliant, but if you go have a little room, you can just sit in that little room for a couple of minutes. When you take that 2 minutes out, if you don't smoke, it's good because you're just in a little room. I don't smoke anyway, but the fact is, you go into this room, it's just a 2 minute time out room for yourself
Right. Yeah,
because
I
everyone
agree.
needs it.
Everyone needs it. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So going into the work you do now and
Hmm.
how you see yourself now, do you see things developing in such a way that is getting stronger for individuals?
Um, I think it's different. I think as an HR practitioner, you know, we just see so many different cycles of of how people adapt to not just the work environment, but also the conditions externally. I think a big topic that is in front of us is around wellness, and organizations are having to invest in employees' wellness, for folks to feel um, more connected within the organization. DEI has gone away, but you still have a population of folks looking at how do they connect into the organization and feel valued and seen, as you were describing earlier. Um, I think another area too that as HR practitioners we worry about is succession planning and talent acquisition, talent development. I think in a soft market, and the market will change, in the next 6 months. Um, those that are happy, they will stay where they are, and those that, to your point, kind of sitting and miserable, I think people will see a lot of seats changing in the workplace. So I think companies have quite a few challenges ahead, and um, with proper planning, and a good plan in place, um, you they'll be able to weather through it. But it will definitely take some strategic planning because the needs of employees in the workplace today is different.
Yeah,
And it's not just one dimensional, right? There are a spectrum of conditions that employees are needing and wanting
yeah.
from an
And
employer.
And if, employees need something from the employer, but the employer also needs something from the employee. And
Mhm.
it's about meeting halfway to say, okay, you're coming from this way, I'm coming from that way. Meet up.
Mhm. Yeah.
Perfect.
Hmm. Sometimes.
Yes, it is sometimes, I know.
Sometimes. But
But
yeah.
but that's where the mutual understanding is. If you
Yeah.
can mutually understand one another to say, okay, we can meet halfway,
Hmm.
that's the ideal.
It's
Obviously,
ideal. It's
but
ideal, but it doesn't always happen that way.
exactly, and that's where the long term I would want it to be is the long term to stay mutually connected, and then it will work better, is my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So obviously, people liking to hear this and wanted to reach out. Can they reach out to you and ask for support and ask you for help? Is there a website? Is there any emails that you can share with us?
Absolutely. Of course, I'm on LinkedIn, but I do have a website. It's theleadershipwise.com. I'm also on Instagram, The Leadership Wise on Instagram. And I have two books that are on Amazon.
And they are called, if I may ask.
Yes, one is on 8 steps to cultivate um, uh, a healthy work environment. It's all about servant leadership. And the second book is on how to give proper feedback. So it's called The Feedback Blueprint.
And I'll make sure the links for the books and your Instagram and LinkedIn are in the description afterwards.
Okay.
So the last question I like to ask, and it's obviously we've gone full circle now. We've gone from the past, what inspired you, to
hmm
seeing how life is currently and how we see things now. But
hmm
obviously the future is always changing. But if you could write or say something for someone who is on their pathway to their journey, what would you say to them to help them on their journey?
Don't give up. Don't give up. Be curious. Be willing to learn. Be willing to challenge, to be challenged. And I would definitely say, have a strong sense of agility. I think there's so many dynamics that are changing the workplace that if we're not agile or curious, we might miss some opportunities. Technology is driving change, processes are changing, skill dynamics are changing, work culture, whether you're remote, in the office, hybrid, that is changing. And so there's just all these kind of, I think, colliding factors that are taking place. And so it's challenging many professionals to look at how they work and what they want from work, right?
Mm,
I just read an article where, some people are taking pay cuts just to have a healthy work environment. And then there are some that are taking a pay cut just to work from home. Um, and then there are some that, of course, that does not want a pay cut. So the dynamics are just shifting a lot. Um, and definitely for sure, don't give up, hang in there,
I love
but
that a
know what
lot.
you want. Yeah, definitely know what you want out of it. That's most important.
That is amazing, and I just hope those words will help a load of people because, it doesn't just help me, it helps everyone listening, and that's the whole ethos of being educated as well as being inspired. Part of what I say of the journey is being
hmm
educated because you are always educated in it, whatever you are listening or
Yeah.
watching.
Yeah. And words are power. I will say this. Words are powerful. You can speak greatness into someone or you can speak harm into a situation. And what you were just talking, we were talking about toxic work environment, it's so important for people to have awareness of the dynamics they bring into the organization. And the art of communication is just so needed today, you know. And I definitely would say have some awareness around that. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree on that. So, Tiana, I'd like to say thank you for sharing your journey with us. Like I
Thank
said,
you.
the links will be in the description beneath, and thank you for sharing your journey today.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Amy Harrison. I just published another book, and this is the first hard copy I've released. Let's claw right into a sneak peek. Hi, I'm my Galaxy Brat. Error. It is becoming clearer. Y'all probably think I'm annoying. Turns out they all just plain boring. I'm just being me, the realest version. Sweet on the inside, tell like it is on the outside. Yes, I embrace love, never hate. But honesty flies in my mouth like a dove. Be careful before it's too late. If you want to read more, visit the link in the description. Meow at you later.
Parsons. The narrator is Kate Barton. Director and producer, Darren Street. Tim Parsons would like to thank family and friends for their support with the paramedic HRIS venture. The series is dedicated to the memory of his father, Reverend David Parsons. Copyright Tim Parsons 2020, all rights reserved. Unauthorized use, copying or sharing of this audiobook is strictly prohibited. This has been a Voice Reel studio production for Tim Parsons.
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. I've just been listening to the Paramedic Chris children's books on audio again, and I just love it because they've given a tribute in one of them to my dad as well, who passed away a few years ago. I love audio books, and it's great to walk around, and it's great to sit at the computer, if you're out jogging or wherever, to listen to them as well. All 4 of the Paramedic Chris children's books are available on audio book from Amazon. Go and take a listen to them. You won't be disappointed. You'll hear what happens when a community pulls together and supports one another. The best thing is to pop over to my website, paramedicchriskidsbooks.org, and you'll see the links on the shop page. Keep safe, everyone, and thank you for being you.
The Journey podcast explores stories of personal growth, challenges, and life-changing moments. Each episode dives into unique experiences, offering insights and inspiration for listeners navigating their own paths. I believe everyone has a story worth sharing. If you'd like to share your journey with David and others, email your story to wisewords1983@reborn.com, and it may be featured in a future episode.